I had a friend of mine who was going through financial difficulties. It was so bad that he was on the verge of becoming homeless. And we can see this was beginning to take a toll on him mentally. And that was one of the reasons that led to his depression. It was so difficult for me to watch him go through all of this. Because every single time we offered to help, he just always rejected it. Because he never, for some reason, never seemed to wanted to appear weak in front of us, or he just refused our help. It made me see the importance of being vulnerable and sometimes seeking for help if you need it. And I also saw how difficult it was to do that because it takes a lot of strength.
In this episode, we sit down with Alan Reid. He gives us an insight on how he has dealt with his own mental health challenges and how he's dealt with vulnerability and what coping mechanisms he's used to be able to overcome that. So enjoy this episode with the Oxymoron Podcast. Indulge. I think we've met Alan Reid a couple times at the McEwen gym. We've seen him a couple times, and he's been, well, personally for me, he's been one of those guys where I'm just like, you know what, this guy, there's something about him, but I don't know what it is. I've always wanted to have a conversation with him, and I'm glad that you're here to sit down with us, and more specifically to talk about men's mental health and more about expounding on the fact that how things have changed, how the conversation has changed in the sense of, excuse me, in the sense that now men's mental health mental health in general is now in the forefront, that people want us to talk about it and everything. But the biggest conversation when it comes to men's mental health is how it's taken, if it's being taken seriously, if certain men would be like they're not being heard. So I don't know if any case or if there's any story where there's been that alignment where you've tried to go with the societal changes and maybe there was some pushback, or how did you go with the societal changes of being able to be vulnerable and open up and be honest about your mental health?
Well, I suppose it's I guess the story brings me back to when I was still in university and college with Grant McEwen, and I don't know how aware you guys are with our involvement with men's mental health in the Movember project that we put together with Keenan and Bobby, the Mighty Most Social, as it's been developed over the years. But it started just as a house party, and really the way that we started getting involved, we just had a jar at the entrance of the house, and people would put a couple dollars in or some cash in there. But at the time, Movember was more specifically focused on prostate cancer, and that's how I got involved. Prostate cancer runs in my family. We lost a couple family members to cancer, and at the time we were pretty passionate about getting involved, and I think there was obviously a lot of I guess a lot of excitement around the fact that you got to just grow a mustache for a month and no one would call you out for having one, right? So we started kind of getting involved and on top of that, and then over the years that started, the party started getting a little bit bigger from a house party. Rewind here or fast forward a little bit, I guess, to about 4 years ago when Movember started then being a little bit more correlated with men's mental health. And at the time we started getting involved with I guess a couple establishments here in the city that were focused on mental health and the stigma around men's mental health. And for us at that point in time, that's how we started then transitioning over to the discussions of men's mental health. I have a brother that suffers from depression and as well as some mental health issues. So at the time we showcased his story, and then we decided to launch our first Mighty Most Social. And at the time we brought MLAs that we had here in the city. We had testimonials from other men in the city, and we raised a fair bit of money for it, as well as bringing in other additional individuals that were able to kind of shed light on it. So I guess the the change, I know that you're probably more focused on how did we start talking about it, but for us it was more of a gradual transition. I don't think that at any time did I say, well, I wasn't going to talk about it or I was going to talk about it. It just so happened I guess the wrong terminology would be that it fell in our lap. It didn't per se fall in our lap, but as Movember got more involved with it, it started coming up on our radar more, so it allowed us to then really wrap our arms around it and be involved as the years kind of came, knowing that we had some personal stories. And obviously Bobby and Keenan were very passionate at the time about everything that's happened in the last couple of years with the BLM movements and everything. How can we also shift this focus, knowing that it's three colored individuals running this or spearheading this project? How do we also get it focused on the colored community and how mental health has affected us? So that's essentially how we got involved in men's mental health.
Mm-hmm. How has your personal journey when it comes to being able to handle your mental health as a man, how have you navigated that in being able to control societal pressures and also your own internal pressures and outside pressures?
Yeah, it hasn't always been easy, of course. I mean, there's the societal pressure, and I think growing up playing competitive sports, I was taught, and still to this day, I mean, you were taught, if playing hockey, if you're not unconscious or broken, you can get yourself off the ice. No matter, if something kind of happens, you tough it out, right? That's always the mentality, tough it out. And to this day, I mean, I just had an MRI last week at the end of the week because I was playing hockey a couple weeks ago and completely annihilated my shoulder, dislocated it, separated it. I couldn't get it back into place but because I want to still kind of play around the fact that, tough it out, I went on the bench and got someone to try and put it back in, and who knows what kind of damage are we going the surgery route? I mean, I remember when I crashed my first motorcycle, shattered my ankle, knocked myself unconscious, but I still was like, instinctively, I was that mentality of toughing it out was get up, even though you're half conscious. I was walking on my ankle with my boot, but it was shattered to pieces. I still tried to jump on my motorcycle, and I did, and drove it away. And my mentality when I got to the trailer was, I'm seeing stars. Like I'm falling in and out of consciousness. Just give me a beer. I'll have a beer and I'll go back out. And until someone said, listen, relax, like take your boot off your ankle. And it was like, it was surgery and everything. But the stigma that we have in society and being a male and growing up is that tough it out. You're fine. So for me, I think my situation is a little unique. I think for myself, I probably compartmentalize a lot of things. Okay, so whether that's for majority of us or not, whether we've seen trauma, whether that's losing somebody or whether that's being injured, I think I had 4 years of, this is where I kind of started my first real mental health, or at least feeling what I would say consider not myself, because I've sat down and chat with you guys for a little bit. I'm a pretty positive guy. I've got an optimistic outlook.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be in the industry I'm in if I didn't. I love the mentality of you put me back into a corner and I'll fight my way out. That's how I function. That's when I do my best work. And that hasn't changed for me. Growing up as, one of the only black guys in a small community, getting into a lot of fights a lot of the time. That doesn't change. So that fighting mentality was fight or flight for me was always fight. My sister's very similar to that as well. But before my wedding, prior to that. I started losing vision one morning in my left eye. So I was waking up in the morning, completely blind in my left eye. And then as the day would go on, the vision would slowly start to come back. And typical male mentality, or at least for myself, is I'm fine. It'll be fine. And then my mom came down to visit, and I was like, man, my eye's getting kind of blurry watching this movie. And she said, okay, I'm booking you an appointment for the optometrist. And, grown man, mom's still booking appointments for the optometrist for you. And I went in there, and the optometrist looked at me and she said, I need you to go to the Royal Alec Hospital right now. And I said, okay, no problem. So I ended up going to the Royal Alec Hospital, and what had happened is I had formed a blood clot behind my left eye. So yeah, typically what happens in a situation like that is you have to go to the Heart and Stroke Foundation, because that blood clot can move into your brain and provide cause a stroke or a brain aneurysm, and you can just die.
Yeah.
And so they said I was running in I think my fourth ultra marathon at that time. It's called the Canadian Death Race up in Grand Cache as one. And they said, listen, you can't go to the gym, you can't run, you can't do anything, because if you increase your blood pressure and it pushes this blood clot into your brain, you could die. For right or wrong, I mean, in hindsight, I was fine, but typical you'll be fine or tough it out mentality, I still ran my ultra marathon basically blind in one eye. But I had to go for 4 months to get surgery. So the surgery entailed, you lay on a table, they take this little spoon thing and it basically pulls your eye out, and then they take and you're awake during all of this, and they take like a Q-tip to put the freezing onto the side of your eye, and then they inject it with a needle, so you feel the pressure of the needle going in your eye. It's like, they say you'll hear a pop. Yeah, it's like popping a balloon. You literally hear a little, and then it goes into your eye and they inject. So I did that for 4 months, got a clean bill of health, and you recover. So now you have to rebuild. So I'm a pretty active athletic person. Okay, well, now you have to rebuild up to the point of where you were, because you've fallen down. You lose, as you guys know. You guys go to the gym. If you're not training for a month, even a month is enough to lose 70% of what you've built. So you bring yourself back up now. So now you need 2 months to get back what you lost in 1 month. So we rebuilt it. And that was my first mental, kind of get on board. Let me actually try and rebuild myself. And it was because it was my first big struggle. It didn't bother me that much. A couple years later, right before my wedding, I go dirt biking. I crash my dirt bike. I get up to go pick up the dirt bike, and I realize, well, my arm's not responding. What's going on? I look down and my wrist is just hanging there. And this was 2 weeks before my wedding. So I end up getting surgery done, and then because your wrist is broken for months, now you're half a year of progress gone. So it takes you a full year to build yourself back up. Still to this day, the mobility of my wrist that's my good wrist, and that's as far as I can bend my broken wrist. So once again, rebuild yourself mentally and physically. Okay? We're not, well, at least for myself, I'm not a big guy. Okay? But, pound for pound, typically, because a lot of my friends are bigger playing hockey, I tend, I can produce if need be. And okay, that's fine. The next year, I rebuild myself to everything, and my mentality is if you fall down, you get back up. So just because I crashed my motorcycle, I'm not scared of it. I'm going to get back on and do what I need to do. I go out and I shatter my ankle the following year. So I just rebuilt myself to get back on the bike, crash it again. Now you're really out. Now you can't walk. It's not that you can use your right hand. Now I can't walk. I physically can't walk. So there's no running, there's no walking. You go to the gym if you can, and you kind of putt around. And the pain was insane. So when they go and they actually have to perform surgeries of this kind, they basically mutilate you to put you back together, because they need to. I've got a compression screw in my wrist, and I've got 5 screws in my ankle to keep my ankle together, because all the fine bones, when I came down on it, it was like a bomb exploded. It just blew my ankle to pieces. It didn't break like that. It blew, like it essentially exploded. Mm-hmm. So that's 8 months. But in all purposes, it took me, well, I didn't start running again. And keep in mind, I had run 7 ultra marathons and 4 marathons at this point in time in my life. I didn't start running again until 3 months ago. Like, actually think that I could run 3 months ago. I woke up this morning, I went on a 5K last night, and my ankle still, I'm limping for at least 10, 15 minutes out of bed. So it's now I've got to rebuild myself mentally and physically again. But what happens is that every time that you have to rebuild yourself, it gets harder. It gets harder, it gets harder, it gets harder, it gets harder. And year after that, I still jump on my dirt bike. I end up dislocating my shoulder and breaking it a bit, a hairline fracture again. So that's almost 5 years in a row. That how many times do you think you can fall back to that extent and keep rebuilding yourself? And then I went through a divorce. as well. So that was within, I guess that was almost 4 years ago now as well. So the thing about divorces is, at least in our particular situation, was it, no matter what happened or transpired, you will always deal with the reacclimatization of a new life without that person or without that group of friends or whatever, because no matter what happens, that's the reality of life. People are like that, whether it was good or whether it was bad, that's what happens. And because of that, you're also losing things. And in my particular situation, whether you feel a little ashamed of what you've done or how it went down, you're dealing with that as well. So now you're battling mentally to kind of get back to where you are and how you're feeling. So that was I would say that was probably some of the lower years, because I think mentally you're tired. Now you're tired. Now you're getting really tired, right? And then COVID happened at the same time, right? So you're not able to go and exert yourself. So the way that I'm able to deal with high mental stress or high mental pressures is exercise. It's the best solution to clear your head, because all that pent up. So they say anxiety, typically, I was watching a Netflix documentary. They say it's the body's fear response back in the day, right? So typically it's fight or flight. But anxiety in our day, what are we right now? If you're suffering from anxiety, usually it's pressures or stresses built up from other experiences. So you can't fight a ghost. Yeah. You can't run from a ghost. So how do you deal with this, especially during COVID when you're not able to? So exercise is great because it allows you to get that, for me, that fight out, right? Because what did I say? I'm always a fighter, I'm not flight. So maybe it's people with anxiety, it's difficult if you don't have that fighter mentality. Because for me, I'll go to the gym and I'll fight myself. I'll push myself a little harder that day, right? So that's how I deal with it. Or I'll look at my watch and I say, well, I'm racing myself today. This is my ghost. Can I run faster than I ran yesterday? Can I swim faster? Can I bike harder? Right? What can I do? So during COVID, I couldn't do that. So that's when the intrusive thoughts start. You start kind of looking at, well, what is there around? Alcohol. And it's not like, listen, Al's being found on the floor with like a bottle outstretched from his hand, but you're drinking more than you normally would drink. And for me, you're putting on weight, but you don't realize you're putting on weight because you see yourself every day. Mm-hmm. So we ended up taking a trip down to Palm Springs, and my buddies will laugh. And Kristen, if she watches this, she'll know that this is a situation. And I laugh about it. It was the motivation I needed. There was a family picture, and Kristen's beautiful. The family's there. They're beautiful. And take the picture. We go back home. And I look at the picture. I'm like, oh, nice picture. I'm like, who is that? I was like, what? I looked at Chris. I said, how did you let me get this fat? And she said, I didn't really notice. I'm like, how could you not? Right? How could you not notice? And so I walk around at about 170 pounds on a regular. That's usually my active weight. Yeah. I've gotten as high as 185, and that's when I thought that I wanted to be bulkier, but it's, for guys like us, the slim look, you look kind of weird. At least for me, for my style, I didn't look how I wanted to look. So I was 210 in that picture. 210. Sheesh. What do you do with that?
Big boy.
You try and run a kilometer, you can barely walk a kilometer. I mean, it was tough for me, right? So I called Mackay here in the city. We've kind of been buddies over the years, and I said, listen, you gotta train me or something here. And because during COVID, I couldn't go to the gym still, so we would do virtuals. And I lost pretty well all of that weight within about 2 months. Just stripped it off. Mm-hmm. And then I need the motivation for a year, so I joined another gym. I started doing that. And now I'm back to the point where Al doesn't need motivation from others anymore. Al's back to motivating himself.
On to Unpacking Black Mental Health. We're here with Zainab to look into Alan Reid's episode where he dealt with several, he had to deal with his mental health in several ways. Obviously, we're going to dissect certain ways in which certain things were positive and certain things were negative. And obviously, we have insight from Zainab here with us to just dissect everything from the episode that we had, and obviously give us professional intake on how to deal with these certain situations.
I'm ready to go. I think, for Alan, it was really just a few things came out that I was like, wow, this is kind of interesting. Kind of watching it, I was really surprised at the amount of injuries he sustained. Were intense. One thing that kind of like I was listening to him and I just heard in my mind was like, strong men don't ask for help equals strong men die, right? So you say, okay, I'm strong and I'm going to tough it out. And there's this tough guy thing. And society has done a very good job of making that super attractive. I mean, you look at the Disney princess movies, you see the brawly guy, he comes and he's saving the day. Nobody cares about how he cut through the thorns to get to the tower, or the dragon he had to fight to get the princess, and how his arm is probably dislocated and all of that. He still has to move forward. And I think that's an unrealistic expectation we put on young boys and men, and to just, be okay with whatever happens to them. Historically, men have had the most difficult jobs, the most difficult positions in the infrastructure of society, and essentially catering to its underbelly. And I think that's a big part of our society that and the male experience that is heavily neglected. And then we glamorize this Machiavellian guy who's like just mysterious and is a bad boy, and that's the guy that everyone wants. Yeah. The one who doesn't show his emotions and is so stoic and just, and not to be controversial, but to be controversial. I saw a video on Instagram. I think I was just scrolling through and I saw this video of like Andrew Tate saying like, men who like show their emotions or what's bad in society, and they turn out to be school shooters and this and that. And I was like, what? I don't know. Not that's accurate. Like it's a eyes shooter, and I said, very unhealthy. And you think of the ears that are here, the amount of people he has access to when it comes to that information. I mean, we know that the percentage of men who die from suicide every year, it's like triple the amount of women.
It's high.
The level of alcoholism and addiction in men is almost quadruple that of women statistically in Canada. So, I mean, when we look at homelessness, the homeless population, men are more heavily affected than women, right? We look at on-the-job injuries, men are more affected than women in that. We look at so many different areas of our lives that, kind of flow into each other, even in family dynamics when it comes to like divorce and like custody and, some of those things. Not to say that everyone is, and of course there's struggles that women do experience in those situations as well. Yeah. But, when are we really going to highlight and focus on what men experience? And I think that Alan was really able to articulate that when he talked about the tough guy, act and, what is the motivation for this, that, and he was just like, I fell on the ice or something playing hockey, and I got up and like popped my shoulder back in.
Shoulder back, yeah.
At what point is the ambulance called? Like, there's just, and the ignorance of the well-being for men, like health-wise, like, visit to the hospital, they took his mom, coming to say like, okay, we'll book you an appointment, like you're going blind. Logically, we need to, so there's this messaging that comes from men. It's like, okay, yeah, your bodies are just to take pain. Sit in pain.
Yeah.
Just marinate in it and be okay with it. But then like still work, still do, still perform, right? And so if a man is going through something difficult, you really want to kind of check in and say, hey, of course, and you gave that example of your friend who, was near to homelessness and still saying like, yeah, I don't need help. Well, when the messaging has been, if you ask for help, you're weak, you're less than, you're inferior, you're not good enough, you're not capable, then it makes men reluctant to ask for help. And then we see a slow depreciation in the amount of men that we have in our societies as a result. So it makes things quite difficult. Yeah. And so, Another theme that stood out, I think that is very important to discuss, was the negative coping skills that men develop as a result. I know earlier in Yemi's podcast we talked about the bit about watching your parents, how they cope, and watching the overwhelms and how they cope with conflicts, and it being now like, okay, alcoholism, or like we're dealing with a mental health issue or stress, and I'm going to like gamble or like go do something bad, right, or engage in like perverse activities. Well, then these negative coping skills have their own detriments as well, so it becomes a cyclical issue, and psychologically that's a problem, right? So when we look at positive coping skills, what does that look like? And Alan had alluded to working out, exercising. That's one aspect to it. I see lots of guys in the gym and they're not getting better, they're just building muscle. That's great to go to the gym, right? But the treadmill can only like you can only do so many lat pull downs to deal with your trauma. Like you have
James,
to
though.
one. Yeah, you have to talk to someone. You have to talk to someone about this. Like sexual assault doesn't work from bicep curls. Like that, it doesn't go away from that. I think, maybe let's explore other ways to kind of manage the pain that you're going through. So some positive coping skills would be meditation for one. That's really good. Affirmations, of course, professional help. That you don't beat that. Certain traumatic experiences can actually lead to more developmental psychological problems like bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder. So several like mood and personality disorders come from traumatic backgrounds. And, because we aren't paying attention, sometimes to the needs of the men around us, those things can go unchecked for a while. And then, we begin to see some more drastic reactions from men in our society. So, in summation, that would be it. Positive coping skills, meditation, talk to a therapist. Exercise is good, but that's not the only thing. Eat properly, get enough sleep, rest. Rest is very important. Go on vacation, talk to your friends, talk to women, because they're, should be better at, if you're male, if you don't have any males around you that are, get a mentor who is emotionally intelligent, read books, self-help books around boundaries and, being emotionally intelligent and, personality, things like that. Those are really good things to do as a start. If you don't want to talk to a therapist first, but talk to a therapist first. That would be great.
Thank you for taking the time to actually help us out with this, and we appreciate your insight on all of this, and obviously having your take on all these topics and just wrapping it up and giving insight on basically the positives and the negatives of everything that everybody's going through. But essentially, all in all, our mental health is very important as our physical health is, and we appreciate you highlighting that. Thank you.
Of course. My pleasure, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.